It's Wednesday, May 20th, 2009, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville. Produced and distributed by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C., this is your NORML Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Welcome to the most popular podcast regarding marijuana in all of America and all the world, featuring interviews with scientists, politicians, doctors, prohibition policy activists, regular cannabis consumers, musicians, and NORML staff and NORML's board of directors, along with music and comedy no other podcast can offer. You can always find out more about our show at our website, stash.normal.org, and continue the education and conversation on our blog as well. We're ending marijuana prohibition with education, one listener at a time. The podcasting and blogging technology for the NORML Daily Audio Stash is provided by Red Aphid Interactive Media. For your professional web design needs, visit redaphid.com. Good day, Stashers, and welcome to the podcast. I wanted to point out a headline I've got up at the Stash blog at stash.normal.org. This came from the Wall Street Journal's law blog, and it was in reference to the U.S. Supreme Court upholding the California Appeals Court ruling that San Diego and San Bernardino had to issue marijuana ID cards. The headline from the Wall Street Journal says, "A Golden State win for pot smokers. The U.S. Supreme Court, or should we say, cue Jeff Spicoli laugh, High Court, rejected appeals from," and then the story goes on and on and on. So once again, another pot pun headline calling medical marijuana patients pot smokers and bringing up the Fast Times at Ridgemont High reference. Have you ever seen this kind of tone from the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, or any other serious old media outlet with regard to any other social policy? Can you imagine if they had written that kind of a headline with that kind of tone for, say, a story on the Special Olympics or a story on gay marriage or civil rights for African Americans? You can bet they wouldn't. So I'm encouraging everyone to complain to the Wall Street Journal and let them know that we don't appreciate them treating us like we're not a serious news story. Now, also, we're still rounding up people all across the nation to help form NORML chapters. I've been in contact with the folks in Charlotte looking to form Charlotte area NORML. Get in touch with me at stash.normal.org and I'll put you in touch with them, as well as activists in southwestern and southeastern Idaho looking to form chapters, and Vancouver, Washington, just across the bridge from me here in Portland. If you're in any of those areas or anywhere in the United States or even abroad, and you'd like to get a NORML chapter formed in your area, send me an email at stash@normal.org and give me permission to pass your name on to others who get in contact with me. Together, we can spread the message of NORML all across the globe. Also, don't forget, this Friday is our Cultivators Corner with High Times Senior Cultivation Editor Danny Danko. So if you've got some questions on growing marijuana, send them in to me at stash@normal.org and we'll get them asked this Friday. Now, coming up on today's Daily Audio Stash, we've got your hemp headlines, including a look at Governor Tim Pawlenty in Minnesota reiterating the fact that he would veto the medical marijuana bill. We've got a story of an 8-year-old in Oklahoma who was caught with some marijuana, a story of an armed robbery and subsequent police chase over marijuana in Humboldt County, and a new study looking at the use of cannabinoids to help fight multiple sclerosis. Today is our Cannabis Science Day, so we'll be visiting with Dr. Mitch Earlywine to ask all sorts of miscellaneous questions that I've rounded up from various blog posts and comments here at the Stash blog. If you'd like to ask Dr. Mitch a question directly, send it to 420research@gmail.com. We're continuing the second week of our Daily Toker Tunes Global Marijuana Music Awards Winners Fortnight, brought to you by MarijuanaMusicAwards.com. And today we get to listen to the best instrumental song. And in our second segment, our California Marijuana Report with Eric Brenner, focusing on all the cannabis news for the Golden State. Remember, marijuana's not going to re-legalize itself. It's up to you to get involved and join NORML. Learn more about it at NORML.org. Now hang on tight. It's time for your NORML Daily Audio Stash.
Hello, I'm Paul Stanford from the Hemp and Cannabis Foundation, or THCF. Medical marijuana is legal in 13 states today, and THCF has clinics in 8 of those states. Our doctors help qualified patients obtain an authorization for medical marijuana in their state. Patients are eligible for medical marijuana with a history of either severe chronic pain and or nausea, cancer, AIDS or HIV, hepatitis, glaucoma, seizure disorders like epilepsy, chronic muscle spasms such as in multiple sclerosis or asthma, neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, and gastrointestinal disorders like IBS or Crohn's disease. If you or someone you know has one of these conditions, our doctors will help you obtain a permit for medical marijuana. THCF Medical Clinics has offices in Washington State, Oregon, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Nevada, Montana, and now Michigan. Call 1-800-723-0188 or go to the web at hemp.org or 1-800-723-0188.
Now it's time to take a look at the latest stories about marijuana from news organizations across America and around the world in our NORML Daily Audio Stash, Hemp Headlines. Minnesota Governor Pawlenty says he will veto medical marijuana bill. From the Minnesota Independent. Governor Tim Pawlenty told reporters on Tuesday afternoon that he will definitely veto a medical marijuana bill that passed the state legislature on Monday. But he added, quote, "I have great empathy for the sick," end quote. In fact, when my state troopers are slapping the cuffs on a cancer patient and throwing him in the back of a squad car for using medical marijuana, I can't help but think, gosh, that's got to be uncomfortable. When my county sheriffs are breaking up families and trashing homes during no-knock paramilitary nighttime raids on an AIDS patient growing marijuana to alleviate his wasting syndrome, it just breaks my heart. And when local cops are busting an MS patient who uses medical marijuana to calm her tremors enough to be able to attend the University of Minnesota, I shed a tear when I think about how she'll spend painful days in jail and lose all her student aid. You'd be hard-pressed to find anyone with more empathy for the sick, dying, and sense-threatened Minnesotans whose hopes I'm crushing with my veto pen. Legislators on both sides of the aisle watered down the bill by eliminating the ability for patients to grow their own marijuana, limiting the bill only to patients who are terminally ill, and adding a sunset date 2 years from enactment. But none of those concessions appear to have affected Pawlenty's opinion of the bill. This is a perfect example of why you do not compromise with rigidly reefer-mad ideologues. You could have limited this bill to protect only one guy named Stan, given a day to live, and allowed him just one 4% THC joint smoked in a locked cell guarded by 6 Minnesota sheriffs, a pit bull, and John Walters, and recorded on closed circuit, and Pawlenty would still veto it. Advocates say that with majority support in the legislature and among Minnesota voters, they will bypass Pawlenty with a constitutional amendment next year. It would have been better to gauge the legislative support for the medical marijuana bill originally submitted. When they return to this issue as an amendment, I fear they'll stick with this watered-down version, knowing it passed both chambers, rather than creating a new fight over a decent bill. 8-year-old with marijuana. From KSBI-TV News, Oklahoma. An Eisenhower Elementary School student found seeds and a green leafy substance in another boy's possession last Friday. The student told a teacher, who then contacted police to verify the questionable substance. Oklahoma City Police Sergeant Jennifer Wardlow said, quote, "When officers arrived, they spoke with school administrators, who did confirm that they have found a substance believed to be marijuana on an 8-year-old student," end quote. Sergeant Wardlow said, quote, "The student was not cited. The administration decided that it was in the best interest of the child to simply notify the parents and suspend the child. The child has been suspended," end quote. Because the school year is almost over, suspension for the boy will end on the last day of school, which is Friday, May 29th. The amount of marijuana found, according to reports, was 250 milligrams, and that's probably including the weight of the seeds found. I've probably got that much weed amongst the lint in my pockets. Now look, I'm not making light of the kid caught with pot. Children should not have or use marijuana unless it's prescribed by a doctor. If this was some of his parents' weed, the parents need to do a better job locking up their stash. But if he didn't get it from his parents, then he got it from another student, or found it somewhere, and at no point did anyone ever check his, or the other students', or the original purchaser's ID. I'm also a bit disturbed that this kid's getting a 10-day suspension from school. It is just the last weeks of the school year, and there's probably not much going on, but how is this boy helped by getting a 10-day head start on summer vacation? Antioch man arrested in wild beer holdup and shooting in Ukiah. A 19-year-old man from Antioch who survived an apparent self-inflicted gunshot to the head has been arrested at a Sacramento hospital on charges stemming from an armed beer robbery last week that ended with the death of his associate. Brian Cole Fiore was arrested at 5:15 p.m. Monday and booked into the Sacramento County Jail on suspicion of attempted murder, robbery, negligent discharge of a firearm, and evading a peace officer with wanton disregard for safety, the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office reported. After an autopsy over the weekend, investigators say they think David Fields, age 21, was shot shortly before the vehicle he was riding in flipped over an embankment along the roadside and rolled to a stop 130 feet down into the ravine below. According to Brenda Godsey, spokeswoman for the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office, Fields and Fiore arranged to meet 6 people in McKinleyville on May 11th to purchase a keg of beer. When Fields and Fiore met the group at a residential McKinleyville intersection, one of the men produced an assault rifle, while the other brought out a handgun, Godsey said. The 2 men ordered the 6 people to the ground, took the keg of beer, and fled in a Jeep Grand Cherokee. One of the 6 reported the incident to police, who soon located the Jeep with the aid of other reporting parties, who indicated they could see a Jeep passenger holding an assault weapon through their vehicle's window. The Jeep was soon located by police, who followed the 2 suspects speeding toward Willow Creek on State Route 299. During the pursuit, the Jeep's passenger fired the assault rifle toward police, but no one was hit. Oh, I'm sorry, Stashers. I made a huge mistake. This wasn't a story over a robbery of a keg of beer. It was a story over 14 pounds of marijuana. I knew there was something funny about that because do you think any of this story would have transpired if we were talking about a keg of beer? First of all, the 19-year-old Fiore wouldn't even be involved, since the liquor store would have checked his ID. The 21-year-old Fields could have just walked into the liquor store, showed ID, signed some paperwork, and purchased a keg for 1/1000th the price of 14 pounds of marijuana. He wouldn't need an assault rifle, and would have very little motivation to steal the keg of beer when he can purchase it cheaply. Even if money was the motivation, and he instead robbed the liquor store with the assault rifle, at least there'd be alarms and cameras for him to deal with. Second, 6 people in McKinleyville would have no motivation to meet 2 young strangers on a residential corner and try to sell them a keg of beer. Not enough profit in it. But because marijuana is illegal and adults can't buy it like a keg of beer, it's profitable enough to rob people over and criminal enough to shoot automatic weapons at cops in residential neighborhoods during high-speed pursuits. Chemical in marijuana to slow multiple sclerosis? The National Institutes of Health has granted Temple University researchers $1.5 million to test a laboratory-made version of cannabinoids for slowing the progress of multiple sclerosis. Cannabinoids are found in nature in the marijuana plant. Researchers believe that this class of chemicals can create immune suppression, which just might help in multiple sclerosis. Much like steroids, but with fewer side effects and much more selectively, cannabinoids can switch off a portion of the immune response and bring down inflammation and hyperactivity of immune cells, possibly preventing or slowing some of the damage caused to the myelin by immune cells. It does this by interacting with the receptors on specific immune cells. Temple researchers have synthesized a compound that has this calming effect on the immune system without any of the psychoactive effects that are associated with marijuana. This 4-year research project begins this summer. If successful, this could be a lovely addition to potential MS treatments, though I say this with caution as preliminary research is just now being done. I'm all for more study of cannabinoids, but why is it that the psychoactive effects that are associated with marijuana are always considered a bad thing? I understand that some folks would want to treat their conditions without getting high, and that's cool. But why is a calm, happy euphoria considered a bad side effect that must be remedied? It reminds me of a Jimmy Fallon joke from his days on Saturday Night Live. Researchers tested a new form of medical marijuana that treats pain but does not get the user high, prompting patients who need medical marijuana to declare, "Thank you?"
There were 765,000 marijuana arrests in 2007. That's not for dealers and kingpins, no, that's just for simple possession. Multiply that by the average cost of each arrest, and what have you got? $7.6 billion spent on people just smoking some pot. That's enough money to buy health insurance for every child that needs it. That's enough cash to adopt every stray dog and enough left over to feed it. Mr. Obama, I kinda wrote this song for you. You got my vote for change. Now let's see what you can do.
Visit NORML.org today. Who is telling you the truth about marijuana? The government? Scientists? Doctors? Which claims are scientifically valid and which claims are reefer madness? Every Wednesday we separate the stems of propaganda from the buds of truth with NORML's look at cannabis science. We're back visiting with Dr. Mitch Earlywine from New York, and Dr. Mitch, welcome back.
Thanks so much.
We talk a lot on this segment here, this cannabis science segment, about the claims about pot and schizophrenia, especially when we start, bringing up the reefer madness stories we get from the United Kingdom. Cannabis will cause you to go psycho and stab your mother, those terrible stories. But you had sent me something that was kind of interesting where they're looking at studies of the synthetic THC and using it to treat schizophrenia. What's the latest science on this?
This is an astounding article. I was really surprised, even myself, on this. But essentially, there were 6 case studies where schizophrenics who had said, oh, by the way, cannabis has helped me in the past, got to go on dronabinol, the THC in the pill. And basically, 4 of the 6 of them got better. It was, I think, a really bold thing to pull off, and the fact that the Journal of Clinical Psychopharmacology was willing to print this, I think, is really to their credit. And I was pleased that in the discussion they sort of make some hints about how, yes, this could be dangerous, but point out, too, that, schizophrenia is a really heterogeneous, potentially damaging problem. There are a whole lot of treatments out there. We never know what's going to work for whom. And here's something that we really do need to add to the armament. But the other thing that this sort of raises is, in fact, all these studies that claim that, schizophrenia is purportedly caused by or even associated with cannabis use start to take a different light when you think about this as more of a self-medication. If 4 out of these 6 have already said cannabis helped me with my symptoms, how do we know that the folks who, allegedly used cannabis and then developed schizophrenia weren't actually turning to it to get rid of some of their core symptoms and, in fact, then later did have a full-blown psychotic break? And so now it looks like, they smoked pot first and then became schizophrenic, when, in fact, really they've been using it to keep that psychotic break, to go without having that.
Yeah, trying to, maintain a decent quality of life here, I'd imagine. It's fascinating study here and this schizophrenia thing. And also, I've got some other points here that were brought up on the blog that I thought we'd address with you too. Last week we had talked about pregnant mothers and their worries about, using cannabis while pregnant and whether or not they'd be, drug detected or lose their children. Something that kind of goes along that same line here. I came up with a story, and this one had to do with marijuana smoking mothers who breastfeed passing the drug to their babies through the milk, which I was a little concerned because I don't think you could pass marijuana through the breast. I think that'd be rather painful. But is there any science out there about THC or any of the cannabinoids passing through breast milk and whether that would be a problem for infants?
The bottom line, Franjo has reviewed this literature time and again, and of course, we wouldn't want to recommend this particularly at high doses, but he points out that the amount that you would have to smoke in order to make a meaningful amount in breast milk would be extremely large, and you'd have to be a pretty regular chronic heavy user for the baby to actually get exposed to a whole lot of THC. Now, we have no idea how sensitive babies are to THC, and maybe a little bitty bit could have pretty dramatic effects, particularly over long term, especially at this, outrageously important time of development. So, nobody's going to say, hey, smoking cannabis during breastfeeding is just A-okay. But this isn't something that somebody should have to certainly, be put at legal ramifications about child endangerment about or something like that. Of course, we don't want, nursing mothers to do this, but I don't want them freaking out and getting paranoid and working themselves into a frenzy over the fact that it might have happened before they really understood or before they knew. The other thing is, a whole lot of this literature suggests that the pump and dump approach, like if you had realized it, and then basically just dumped your breast milk rather than giving it to the baby and waited for, the next lactation time, that seems to be relatively effective. And again, it's one of those weird underground things in the alcohol literature that looks like it's not led to any serious negative consequences. But of course, the ultimate is let's, keep breastfeeding going, and let's try to keep that breast milk as clean and appropriate as possible.
Yeah, that's my basic answer to all these questions are usually if you're moderate in your use, then most of these things would require huge, like you said, huge amounts of cannabis to be used before causing a big problem. In this story too was some interesting quotes. Strangely enough, a Dr. David Sack warned about the use of marijuana, being 3 times stronger, he says, can result in lower sperm motility and gynecomastia, or enlarged breasts among men. I was at first a little concerned about someone named Dr. Sack talking about sperm motility. Goes along with some of our other studies, I guess. But
good old Fred Blow and his cocaine research.
Exactly. So do you have any information on this man boobs, this enlarged breasts?
The gynecomastia thing is clearly fallacious. There were 4 cases published in the 1970s that guys had happened to have gynecomastia and had happened to smoke cannabis, but they really didn't look into all the other sources. And the fact is, some folks just get this. And if you look at the number of marijuana smokers and how many people get it, these are about how many you would expect by chance. The real source of gynecomastia, in fact, is steroid abuse, and I'm stunned that we're not hearing more about that. The sperm motility data actually are for real, but again, it's very high doses, and it's definitely reversible. Nahas is the guy who's known for it, and he is not the most, shall we say, respected scientific researcher in that era, and I know he's having some problems of his own now late in life, and I don't mean to malign the guy. It's just he's the only one who's got this kind of finding. And basically, guys who were in the hospital who smoked 8 joints a day for 8 days in a row had reduced sperm count and sperm motility, but it didn't actually go below normal levels. So I've generally said, if you're really trying to get your wife pregnant, by all means take some time off, but this is not birth control. You cannot count on this as some kind of way to prevent conception, because it just doesn't do it.
Yeah, my stock answer on the sperm motility is, that's why the Rastafarians died out. As far as the gynecomastia, I think I would buy the fact that cannabis doesn't cause man boobs, but Cheetos might.
Exactly.
A lot of that might just be, overeating and a lack of exercise, I'd imagine.
Exactly.
So, the final thing I've got in here from, just our random, roundup of, I guess, reefer madness here. This nurse in this story also mentions that people who smoke it several times a week have higher rates of depression. And, just wondering if you could debunk any of the depression statistics here with marijuana.
I've gone through this literature several times, and actually that big meta-analysis that suggested the link with schizophrenia that got so much coverage also reviewed all the depression literature and showed no link, and of course that got no coverage at all. So Tom Denson and I have a paper in Harm Reduction Journal that basically showed once you throw the medical users out, the cannabis users are actually a little bit happier than the non-users, but needless to say that's not going to get any press. And the big reviews of 7 studies longitudinally suggested, yeah, early in life, heavy use did co-vary with depression, but I'm thinking, again, it may be more of a self-medication issue. And when you collapse across them all, the link is essentially zero, so that it doesn't necessarily alleviate depression for folks. It doesn't increase their risk either. I do want to emphasize that we've got splendid behavioral treatments for depression. If folks are willing to pick up David Burns' book, Feeling Good, that's a wonderful way to handle some of that. I realize that's an old one. There's a great one by Steve Hayes called Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life that a number of folks have just had wonderful responses to. And often it's a matter of, spending 3 months just doing fun stuff. And what a surprise, depression can really lift. And in truth, I think some of the best therapies rely basically on that fundamental principle.
And this same nurse who had mentioned that in here has a quote in here where she's trying to bring up the pot potency argument again, how strong the pot is, and says, since the pot is stronger, that means you become more high and stay high longer. Any thoughts on that?
Well, so we've got some data from Matthias showing that people who smoke stronger pot tend to take smaller hits. I believe James Zachney's lab has also confirmed that, and that's just with like the 4% THC versus the 2% that you can get from NIDA. So you can imagine when somebody's got a hold of something that's really in the double digits of THC percentage, they also modify their consumption. And in fact, you think about it, I talked to friends who, smoked cannabis in the 70s. There was never a lot of one-hit weed, and the fact that we even have that expression sort of lets you know that clearly folks are not accustomed to smoking large amounts anymore like they were back in the day. I mean, I hear these stories back from people who say lid when they meant an ounce, of sitting down and having 3-4 joints in a night, and nobody does that anymore. It's just not the same deal. And I feel like this tacit assumption that stronger means more dangerous is something we're accustomed to from the alcohol literature, but in fact we're seeing time and again folks tend to first of all pay more, which makes them a little more frugal about it, and generally smoke less, and that less exposure to TARs, etc., means less opportunity for respiratory irritation.
Is there such a thing, though, scientifically, as more high? I mean, isn't high? I mean, you get high with a lot of poor marijuana or a little good marijuana, but isn't high?
Craig Rainerman's been trying to address this over the years, and I think he's got a splendid thing where it's basically just 0 to 6. How high were you? And what's funny is, basically from the 1970s on, people pretty much like to get to a 3 or a 4, and that's sort of how it goes, regardless of how much they use, how often, or things along those lines. And so it does seem like there's this sort of target high point, and people smoke till they get there, and then tend to quit. Again, I feel like novice users, or, a friend was telling me about sitting around with a bunch of competitive jocks who were used to, making each other do beer bongs, suddenly saying, hey man, you didn't clear the bong, as if like this was some kind of competitive sport, and it's just, that's laughable. But these are by far the exceptions and not the rule. Most folks use until they feel the subjective effects and quit, and that's partly the advantage of an inhaled vapor or a smoked drug, is that your impact of the effect is really rapid. So you don't have to wait a half an hour and wonder. You know where you are, and then you know how to quit.
Yeah, I often point out to these people that, most of what the American public knows about drugs is alcohol. So in their mind, they think, a shot of whiskey's worse than a beer, so stronger marijuana must be worse than weaker marijuana. And they also only have the experience of having done that, let's say the 6th shot of the night, and then 40 minutes into it realizing they should have stopped at 2, whereas marijuana use is completely different than alcohol use. I think that's what causes a lot of the confusion for people.
Well, and I think the solution to this is for all adults to try marijuana.
Well, there we go, Doc. I love it. Well, thank you for joining us here and kind of clearing up some of these random questions that have been sifting around here in the blog. If anyone out there listening has some questions for Dr. Mitch Earlywine, you can send them into 420research@gmail.com. Thanks again for spending some time with us, Doctor.
Oh, thanks so much, Russ.
It's tough talking to kids about marijuana, especially if you might be a parent who dabbled a time or two in your youth. So to help you out, get your copy of Dr. Mitch Earlywine's latest book, A Parent's Guide to Marijuana. Dr. Earlywine is an associate professor of psychology at the State University of New York at Albany and an expert on the studies concerning marijuana, its effect on health and society, and the methodology behind the statistics. He is a frequent guest here on our daily audio stash. Dr. Earlywine lays it all out without the propaganda and scare tactics that parents know won't work with teenagers. He presents a rational understanding of cannabis, what it is and what it isn't, and why kids shouldn't be using marijuana. You can order today through Amazon.com or check our links at our blog, stash.normal.org. The battle to end adult marijuana prohibition can sometimes seem endlessly frustrating and impossible to overcome. One way we bond as a community and draw strength to continue is by rejuvenating our spirit through art and music. The Marijuana Music Awards exist to recognize those sonic artists in all genres of music who feature a ganja-friendly message to motivate and inspire all the cannabis community. Our daily Toker tunes, brought to you by MarijuanaMusicAwards.com, feature the finest in blues, rock, jazz, hip-hop, rap, reggae, country, bluegrass, and dance music to enhance that 420 feeling and refresh all you stashers for another day on the front lines of the drug war. Enjoy this cut from MarijuanaMusicAwards.com and visit our blog at stash.normal.org to learn how you can vote for your favorites and enter your Toker tunes in the 2009 Marijuana Music Awards. For a change to the normal music genre we play on the Stash Toker tunes, today we hear 2009 Global Marijuana Music Awards Best Instrumental winner, Fly Me to the Moo by Feel Good from Germany. Philipp Rademacher established the trademark Feel Good Music as a basis for independent music production, events, and more. In the last 25 years, they have attained expert knowledge in different areas of the entertainment business, centering on events, TV, and help for artists. Feel Good Music are always looking for new and exceptional ideas, and you can find out more about Feel Good Music at myspace.com/Philipp Rademacher. That's PhilipRademacher. And registered stashers, you can get an MP3 download of this tune. It's the 2009 GMMA Best Instrumental Song by Feel Good, Fly Me to the Moo.
76% of Americans no longer support arresting and jailing marijuana smokers, and nearly as many support the medical patients having access to medical marijuana. And over 80% of our citizens now believe the war on drugs is an ineffective failure. So the question is, when will the government's misguided war on adult marijuana smokers finally end? When? Simple. When you and your like-minded friends, family, and coworkers get involved with an organization such as the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, also known as NORML. My name is Keith Stropp, and I founded the organization in 1970. Contact us at NORML, toll-free, 888-67-NORML, or by visiting the organization's up-to-date webpage at www.norml.org.
Thank you for downloading the NORML Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. We are produced by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C. Our executive producer is Alan St. Pierre. Our deputy director is Paul Armentano. Our webmaster is Brian Judy. And web production is provided by Red Aphid Interactive Media. As always, you can catch up on the latest information about marijuana at www.norml.org. And you can interact and download from our Audio Stash blog at stash.norml.org. For everyone here at NORML, I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville, hoping all your harvests are bountiful and your encounters with law enforcement are non-existent. We leave you today with some phone numbers and some reminders. Call President Obama at 202-456-1111 and demand that he commute the sentence of Eddie Lepp. Call your Congress at 202-224-3121 and demand that they support Ron Paul's Industrial Hemp Farming Act of 2009. And call Attorney General Eric Holder at 202-353-1555 and demand that he uphold his promise to not raid California medical marijuana dispensaries acting in accordance with the law. If you don't have those numbers programmed into your cell phone, you should, as well as the direct number to your state legislators. Remember, it's our government. They work for us. They need to know what you think, or they'll just do and vote for what they think. Thanks for joining us here on the podcast. We'll be back tomorrow. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.